Israelis facing many challenges. One of them is the idea that you send your child to service and he is getting married, doing the service, and he can be at his early 20s and unfortunately doing the actions get killed. And that's the painful reality that the Israeli face all the time. On the top of that, there are situations when they have bomb explosions and other reasons that young man left his grieving wife with no children. The parents are still young in a way, and they, right after that crisis, they have a new child, which happened again many times. That child sometimes even named after the deceased brother. In the previous daf, we discussed the situation of ייבום, which is a biblical obligation upon the living brother to perform a Levirate marriage with the wife of the deceased, in order to perpetuate, the Torah said in Deuteronomy, the brother's seed within the family. Here is the issue. We call it in our Mishnah, Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Be'olamo. What does that mean? The brother, if we want to use name just for our understanding, Reuven, who get killed, he does not have a child, and Shimon was born after Reuven was no longer among the living. Now Shimon is a baby. For our discussion, let's say the wife of Reuven, let's call her Dinah. Dinah, she now needs to wait for Shimon to grow up and act as a Levirate or release it for וחליצה or not? If yes, how late? This is one subject we're going to discuss today. We're going to discuss another subject, that it's the difference between blood relatives, kirvat dam, versus kirvat chitun, which means you have a relationship as a result of marriage. Example, a father to his daughter, that's or son, it's a blood relative. Daughter-in-law, it's already toward marriage, is different category. Another subject we're going to discuss in Mitzvah Hashem is the difference between וחליצה and ייבום, what take precedence. Meaning, if we have an issue of Levirites, do we go ahead and do act of וחליצה, which is removing the shoe and release, as we explained in the previous daf, or not? We have another issue, which is the difference between tzara, which is the co-wife, and the tzara tzarata, meaning Reuven has a daughter, and Reuven passed away. His brother Shimon, he halachically, meaning followed the Torah, he can marry the daughter of his brother. Even Shimon himself can have another woman. That's biblically okay. Now, Reuven, in that case, is deceased. If Levi come in, which is the third brother, that came in the picture after Reuven passed away, as we said earlier, the issue is he can make a Levirate marriage with whom he can have either or. Either if Shimon again passed away with no children, with the wife which was the daughter of Reuven and the wife of Shimon, or in a way the widows of Shimon. So in a way, I heard, it's a joke, I'm saying in advance it's a joke, I heard from one of my teachers in the past that after study Tractate Chagiga, after you have Chagiga, you know what is a Chagiga means? It's a party. After you have Chagiga, you have Tzara, you have Tzores, you have problems, right? Anyway, we are on page 3. Kulhu nami midrasha atu, all that list of women we mentioned in a Mishnah, you remember we have 15 on the list, they exempted from act of Levirate marriage because we use the word achot isha. The Gemara said, Nehi delinyan ייבום atya midrasha, ikar isurayu behedya ktiv behu. So even we derive this learning from exegesis, which means from drasha, from explanation, the essence of their prohibition, it's written clearly in the Torah, as we read on Yom Kippur, Mincha, and Leviticus chapter 18. Bito ikar isura midrasha. The daughter, we derive the learning of the daughter, and the daughter is from anusato, someone who came out of act of rape, which you explained the previous session, because the daughter from his wife, it is clearly that this part which we call bat ishto. The Amar Rava Amar li Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abdini, atya hena, atya zima zima. We learn in a verbal analogy, they use the word hena twice, which is the juxtaposition, and the word zima twice. Now we derive toward the punishment. The punishment for zima is sreifa. And if you remember the previous daf, we explained that there are 4 categories of punishments: skila, sreifa, hereg, vachenek. And since the idea of sreifa, it's clearly written there, versus ervat bat, the nakedness of daughter, it's not learned clearly in the Torah. The only way to learn it is from the verbal analogy. The Torah said in Leviticus 18, line 17, they said, ervat isha uvita lo tegale. You shall not have the nakedness of a woman and her daughter. Et bat bena, the daughter of her son, ve'et bat bena lo tikach legalot ervata, she'era hena zima hui. So in that pasuk, we have the prohibition of the daughter of his wife, the daughter of her son, and the daughter of her daughter, regardless if it's from her and or from other men. However, his daughter, or daughter of his son, or daughter of his daughter that come out of anusa, as we explained, the act of raping, so that it's not part of that pasuk, because when the term isha was written, it means ishut. Ishut meaning the normal intercourse between an entity of husband and wife. That's the way Rashi explained that. Tosfot have a different view. So then it's written there, ervat bat bincha or bat bitcha lo tegale, the nakedness of the daughter of your son or daughter of your daughter, you shall not tegale, you shall not reveal the nakedness, ki ervatcha hena. So you do not have the word isha, so we learn that is the prohibition of the daughter of his son and the daughter of his daughter from verbal analogy of anusa. So we do not learn it just from the daughter of the anusa, we learn it from verbal analogy. We use the word heina twice in two different locations. So the same way that we learn she'era eina, so here it's written ki ervatcha eina, meaning the same ways that the prohibition of nakedness, of relation from his wife is prohibited to him biblically. The same applies to his daughter, or the daughter of his son, or the daughter of his daughter. The same way that nakedness from anusa is prohibited, the same manner, daughter of his daughter, daughter of his son. Which means that the verbal analogy of the word heina, heina twice, teaches us the prohibition of his daughter from the anusa, from that act. Now, the Rashi elaborates on that. And Rashi tells us, in order to learn the punishment involved with the nakedness of his daughter, we need to have another verbal analogy, which is the word zima twice. And since we use the term of sreifa, which is the punishment, burning punishment, which is a very severe punishment, the Torah said it in Leviticus 20, sentence 14, Ve'ish asher yishkach et isha ve'et ima, the person that takes wife and her mother, zimahi, it's considered an act of illicit relations. Ba'esh yisrefu oto ve'et hen, the Torah used the term burning fire. So therefore, it is written in regards to the prohibition of mother and daughter, zima. So we learn in a verbal analogy the same way that the mother-in-law, the punishment is sreifa, is the burning. The same way the zima, the act of illicit relation between mother and daughter, the punishment is the same manner, is sreifa. So we learn from that the daughter of his wife, the daughter of her daughter, and the daughter of her son, the same manner is the punishment sreifa. So we derive from that also a daughter that come out of anusa, which is a different term of relationship, because it was act of rape, as we explained, the measurement biblically by this verbal analogy is the same, which is also in sreifa, in the punishment of burning, because we compare the law of anusa in regards to the daughter of his wife, the same verbal analogy of heina, heina, 2 times. Now, so since the essence of that prohibition from the daughter of anusa not written clearly, lucidly in the Torah, we only derive that from the rabbinic teaching, rabbinic exegesis. So in a way it's chaviv, it's better in a sense for the Tanah, for the sage, to put it first in the list. So the Gemara asks, Hashta de'amart, kol mita de'atya midrasha chaviva lei? Since you tell me that he preferred to put, like you're putting food, some people leave the best part of the food to the end of the meal. Some people like to eat the best part, they like the first part of the meal, right? So here we say that he puts it first. Litnei la'achot isha livsof. Since we learn all the laws of arayot, all the laws of the nakedness from the sister of his wife, that it's basically exempt a person from Levirate marriage and also exempt the co-wife, the tzarotehem. So therefore, the rest of the arayot, of the nakedness, is also chavivot, it's also clause in a sense of mention them, and it should take precedent to the sister of his wife. So you see here two different type of drashot, two different way of exegesis, right? One is bito. The daughter is not said lucidly in the Torah. You cannot find it. So therefore, it has this type of precedence. It should be magia zchut rishonit. It should be the first to mention that. The rest, it's written in Torah. You have that long list in Leviticus 18. The sister of his wife, achot ishto, we learn from Erva and Yevamot, and therefore it should be the last one of that list. Again, we are speaking about that list of 15. So the Gemara responds, and they said, Aide de aire beisur achveta tana. Since the Tana already occupied himself by mentioning all the prohibition of relation with sisters, such as sister of his mother, sister of his stepmother, etc. So therefore, he learned also the sister of his wife, since you put together the subject of sisters. So the Gemara challenge, is that the case? Again, we're talking about the list of the 15 in the Mishnah. Velitnei lehai bava livsof. So therefore, you know what? Take all this group of all the sisters and put it at the very end of the Mishnah, which means first you should mention the daughter-in-law, and then before the sister from his mother, and then you can mention the sister of his wife at the very end. Why? There is a rationality, there is a logic behind that. A person are most connected to his blood relative. You see it in many avenues in the Torah. We take the child of a person, it's the most connected, it's a blood relationship. So there is a concept, we learn it in several times in the Talmud, Rotze Adam bekav shelo, a person rather use something that it's more that it's his, יותר מתשעה קבין של חברו, more than something that someone else. So therefore, we go back and we said, Elatana kurvei nakat, which means the Tana use the chronological order was go by the closest of the blood relativities, which means the closest to him, it's first, and then he go further on. Meaning, what is the most closest to a person? For example, it's his daughter, the prohibition against relation with a person and his daughter, right, which is the illicit relation. That's the closest blood relatives. Then you go further. Tana, at the very beginning, Bito, this daughter, Uvat Bito, the daughter of his daughter, Uvat Beno, and the daughter of his son, Dikrovei Hatzmo, because they are blood relatives, they are connected to him, they come from his zera, from his semen, from his seeds. So first, the closest blood relative, not because of his wife, not because of others. And Rashi said that that's the essence of the reason for the list. Since you go down, you ascend 3 generation, D-Day, Tana Nami Shlosha Dorot Lemata Dida. So you go here by daughter, that is the 2nd generation from him, and then the daughter of his daughter, the daughter of his son, that this is basically the 3rd generation. So he learned also 3 generations down from his wife. Why? There is a concept that's called ishto kegufo. In the Talmudic terms, many times we consider wife and a person as one entity. I heard once from one of my friends, he said he used to call a man, he was married 50 years. and you start talking to him and he turned to be his wife. He says, you have the same vowel, the same sound. Did it ever happen to you? You're calling to someone and you answer by his or her spouse, and you see the same manners, the same talk, the same thing. The people are live together in many ways. You consider them as one entity. So therefore, you go by the closest 3 generations of blood relatives. Then you go by the daughter of the person's wife, the daughter of her daughter, the daughter of her son, and the daughter of her daughter. So even it's not his blood relative, but that's the order that you go. והיידה דתנא 3 דורות למטה דידה, since you go 3 generations from his spouse, from his wife, תנא 3 דורות למעלה דידה. So now you go back and a 3 also from her, which is her mother, his mother-in-law, that is the 2nd generation above his wife, and then the mother of his mother-in-law, and then the mother of his father-in-law, that again it's going up in the tree to the 3rd generation from his wife. His wife, her mother, her mother's mother, her father, her father, mother. Vetana achoto, and then he teaches us about the sister from his mother, va'achot imo, and the mother, the sister of his mother, dikrovei atzmo, because they closest to him. So therefore, it take precedence before his daughter-in-law, that she is not connected to him only because she married to his son, she is now prohibited to him. Simply speaking, if she was out, he can marry her. Just because his son married her, now she turned to be prohibited. So if you remember in the introduction, we explained that we differentiate between blood and blood that comes out of kirvat chitun, because they someone within his blood relativity married to someone else. Ve'aide de'aire be'isur achva, since we speak in a Mishnah in the prohibition of his sister and the sister of his mother, tana ishto, which is darga shniya, which is the 2nd level, that it's in resonate the same idea of sister, and it's not coming out of drasha. Ubedin hu delikdema. The truth is, this is the last 3. You remember the 15, we have the list, and you have 3. The likdema lekalato, that it should be before his daughter-in-law, while the punishment is skila, stoning, which is different term. Mikamei eshet achiv shelo haya be'olamo. It should be before the brother that wasn't around when he is alive. And even though he put it before the sister of his brother from his mother. Why? Delo mishum kurva hu de asira. It's not because of closest relativity it's prohibited. In my book, Berah Klomar Berashi al Hashas, I explain here Rashi. Rashi said, כלומר, וכיוון דקרובים נקט ועזל, וקלתו ואשת אחיו שלא היה בעולמו. In very short, I must tell you that I spent a lot of time, and it's a very long writing here. I tried to make it in a very brief way. The idea is, if you take level of punishment, you have skila, stoning, sreifa, hereg, chenek. So you have a prohibition because it's connected to the person himself, kirvat atzmo, and therefore the kala, the daughter-in-law, is, the punishment, biblically speaking, is skila. And here you see, which I explain much more in my book, you're welcome to read, it's a different view between Rashi and Tosfot here. Rashi said that all these three are basically connected to him. Rashi said, the hanach lav mishum kurva didei asir alei, which means their all prohibition come out of chatnut, because they married someone with his in family, like his daughter-in-law. So that's in that category, it's not considering kirva, meaning, as we said, blood relatives, kirvat dam, versus kirvat chitun, that they now turn to be prohibited because they married to his son. There is a sister and there is a wife. Sister of his wife is the essence of the problem of the sister. According to Rashi, it's all wrap up, which we call kirvat chatnut, and not kirvat dam. The issue is because they get married, not the issue of daughter. So when it's come to the daughter-in-law, since is skila, the rest you have the karet. Karet is very different category. Tosfot said that when it's come to blood issue, kirvat dam, there are different categories, and the same kirvat ishut, because of the marriage, is also different category. When it's come to his son, that's the closest kirvat dam according to Tosfot. And the same when it's come to his daughter-in-law, she is the closest one. The Ritva said that the reason we put first the relationship with his brother that wasn't when he was alive, which you remember earlier we explained that the brother can be born to the parents after the oldest brother passed, killed, or whatever the reason is. So since he's no longer among the living, the new one doesn't ייבום, because it's missing, חסר באח הגמור שלו, it's missing something with his brother. The good example, which again I give you the abbreviation of the Ramban and Ritva and the Meiri, it's the biblical story of Yaakov. We have Yaakov, who married in Torah, Jacob. He married Leah and he married Rachel, Leah and Rachel. Now think about Reuven and Yosef. Reuven, the first son of Leah. Yosef, the first son of Rachel, right? So they have together the same father only. So a brother from mother, we do not have the concept of ייבום, of Levirate marriage. So here you see a good example. As we said, for those who came in later, if you have, for example, Israelis face it a lot, you have a brother, one was married at his, let's say, 21 years of age, and he was in the army, and short time after he got married, he get killed, and he has no children, and he has no brothers at that time. And the parents have another child after that. That child basically is, hypothetically speaking, looks like a Yavam, right? Levirate. But the Torah tells us that he is not under that category. So, in general, if it was an irregular case of ייבום, you can wait, it's a different view, the age of 9, the age of 13, it's a discussion. But here, it's not relevant. That's the idea of שלא היה בעולמו, and you're welcome to read more in my book. So back to our point here, אלא איידה דאיירי באיסור אחווה, since we speak about sister of his mother, sister of his wife, Tana, we learn also the sister of his mother, אשת אחיו שלא היה בעולמו, the sister, the wife of his brother that wasn't there when he was born. that it's also part of that entity which called achva. Ve'adar tana kalato, and then you go to the next step, which is his daughter-in-law. So you see, by both Rashi and Tosfot, the daughter-in-law needs to be connected to the term of Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Be'olamot. The wife of his brother wasn't there when he was alive. So Kalato, the daughter-in-law, Kodemet Leshneim, should come first before this. So now you have the whole three, last one, and Kalato, the daughter-in-law, should be the first one. Now we go to a new subject. Since the Mishnah gives us the list of the 15, so now we said, Umay Irya Detana Potrot. Why the Mishnah used the term of exemption to those tzarot, to those co-wives? Because it means that they only exempt those co-wives from the act of levirate marriage, but if he wish, he can do that. You see, the language is, when you use the term exempt, which means you're not chayav, you're not obligated. Which means if you menadev, if you voluntarily wish to, no, why not? Maybe good. So therefore, it's incorrect, because here, since it's exemption of levirate, so then you go back to the prohibition of isur eshet ach. Let me explain to those who come late what is all about. We have two conflicting messages in the Torah. In one place in Deuteronomy, the Torah encouraged the living brother of the deceased to go ahead and marry and redeem or do act of levirate with the wife of the deceased in order to perpetuate the name of the deceased in the family. One concept. On the other hand, in Leviticus, the Torah prohibited a marriage with the wife of the brother, the wife of the brother deceased. And we explain that it's all depend upon the circumstance. So therefore, why did Mishnah use the term potrot, meaning exempt? Litnei osrot, they are prohibited to the co-wives, which carries a different connotation. So therefore, it's not just exempt and you have the choice. Itana osrot, the Gemarrah responds saying, Hava amina asur leyabem, that we are prohibited to act as a levirate marriage with the co-wives, aval michlatz chalza. So here we have two entities. One, it's called the act of levirate, and if a person does not wish, then you go to the other way, which is the act of removing shoe, etc., which is וחליצה. וחליצה, you may think that she needs, since the brother of the father passed away without sons, so his wife is in a state of limbo. She cannot be released without act of וחליצה. Kamash Melan, the Tana teaches us that those arayot exempt tzarot, exempt the co-wives. It means that they are exempt totally. They do not have even וחליצה. So if that's the case, velitnei aswa lachalotz, so it means the Mishnah should say 15 women are prohibited to co-wives, to both, to ייבום and to וחליצה. So that's the language that the Tosfot Yeshanim and Tosfot Arosh said it. So my ka'avid, what type of issue you have with the וחליצה, meaning if the Mishnah used the language osrot, it's prohibited. The Mishnah cannot continue saying that they are prohibited also to do act of וחליצה, because even they are exempt from וחליצה, but you may think, what's the big deal of removing the shoes, spit, all these acts? Specifically in regards to ייבום, you can say it, since they are prohibited to have this act of levirate marriage, the Ritva explains, So therefore, you ask, what's the issue? My kavid, if the person does that. So they said, alama lo, why not? Im ata omer choletzet mityabemet, so since she is exempt from וחליצה, so therefore you cannot do וחליצה in vain. כיוון דמקום מצווה הוא דאסירה צרה, since the koaf of erva, of nakedness, prohibited only when it's come to the mitzvah of ייבום, ושלא במקום מצווה, meaning when they marry to another man that it's not his brother, and he's passed away, sharia, those tzara allowed, mishum achitane potrot, meaning if the Mishnah did not said that these arayot prohibited their tzarot, we may thought that this act of erva start a new prohibition on those co-wives, that because of that tzara are prohibited to have this act of ייבום. Umay iria detane. So why the Mishnah said that they are exempt, those co-wives, mina וחליצה ומina ייבום. Litnei mina ייבום lechudei. So here we see two entities. One is ייבום, one is וחליצה. So we derive, if you use the word mina ייבום, וחליצה as well. Because what we understand that the essence of the mitzvah is the ייבום. If they exempt from that essence of the mitzvah, so therefore obviously they are exempt from the וחליצה. So the Gemara said, no, itana mina ייבום. If we Mishnah only mention the word from ייבום, hava amina, it's entered to your mind to think, michlat וחליצה ייבום elo יומי יבמה. So you may think that, yes, she needs a וחליצה, the only thing we are prohibited is ייבום. So Rashi tells us that that the Torah exempt those co-wives only from ייבום. Now, but the וחליצה we may need. So therefore, kamash melan, the Tana teaches us clearly that these co-wives exempt from וחליצה. Why? כל העולה לייבום עולה לחליצה, וכל שאינו עולה לייבום אינו עולה לחליצה. We have the oraita, we have biblical, which is מותר לייבם, allowed to do ייבום. And you have the rabbinics that prohibited, which means this is something we're going to learn in the future. You have biblical concept and you have rabbinic concept. So if the rabbinic comes, the rabbis come in and said you are not allowed, so therefore you go to the next option, which is the וחליצה. So the Gemara asks, velitnei mina ייבום umina וחליצה. May we have the ייבום before וחליצה? Why? Because again, the ייבום, we're in a school of thought that that's the essence of the mitzvah. Inami mina וחליצה lechuda. We may put, since it's not applied to ייבום, we just put the word וחליצה, and therefore we understand that they are exempt from וחליצה. For sure they are exempt from ייבום. Why the Mishnah need to bother to say both mina וחליצה umina ייבום? And now we enter to something very important which we're going to learn in page 39. Abba Shaul hi de'amar mitzvat וחליצה kodemet lemitzvat ייבום. This is something that's very applicable because it applies to our times, and we have to learn this school of thought. You have a situation, two brothers, like Er and Onan in the Torah, right? Yehuda had 3 sons. Er married Tamar. Onan was there. Abba Shaul said, look, if you act like Onan, you marry Tamar, either because you just want to have someone to, to be your wife, you need a wife, right? Or you have children and you need someone to take care of your children. Or you marry her because you want to have money. Or whatever other motivation, you like her body, you like her appearance, etc. all of those machshavot zarot, all of those thoughts, that the reason you want to marry her, the wife of the deceased brother, it's because of all kind of desires, and we don't say that they are bad, but it's just because of other desires. Here Abba Shaul come in and said, hey, prohibited. Why? And he used the term, listen carefully, karov ha'avlag liyot mamzer. We know in the Torah that there is mamzer. How do you say it in English, bastard? Something like that. All right? Now, here is the idea. Abba Shaul said, only if Onan married Tamar in order lehakim shem leachiv, in order to perpetuate the name of his brothers, then and only then, right, is the mitzvah of ייבום. Remember, we said that it's a conflict between violation, terrible, strong prohibition against marrying the wife of the deceased brother, versus a mitzvah to levirate. So Abba Shaul said, hey, I need to know the intention. If the intention is 1% of 100, not pure, to have continuation of the name of the deceased brother within the family, this turned to be violation. And I hold that this baby, this future child, it's close in my mind to be a mamzer. If you marry her because of her beauty, because of her money, because you take care of your children, because you need someone to be with you life, all of that is wrong. That's, by the way, the reason that the chief rabbinate of Israel decided upon establishing the state not to have ייבום, follow that school of thought. Yes, it was some Yemenite Jews that came to Israel, and for a certain period of time they let them do this act of ייבום in their communities, but again and again and again. That's the school of thought we're going to study furthermore on page 39. So since the Mishnah want to teach us that וחליצה is preceded ייבום, so therefore we need to mention both. Tosfot elaborate and said, if we mention only וחליצה, we will not know what take precedent before others, what involved here. The Rambam said that the disputation between the sages and Abba Shaul is what exactly the level of leniency that the Torah allow the prohibition of married the wife of the deceased brother in regards to ייבום. Minyana dereisha lema'ut teiman. So what's the list? The Mishnah said of 15 women come to teach us. Uminyana de seifa lema'ut teimai. And why we have this list at the last part? 3b lema'utei de Rav v'de Rav Asi. They come to exclude the ruling of Rav and Rav Asi, which is the whole act of adultery and the idea of Ailonit that we learned in the Mishnah, exempt their tzarot, the co-wives. The Gemara asks, "Lerav ulrav asi lema'utei mai." What exactly you try to exclude? So, because according to Rav, the Mishnah not meant to speak about excluding of the co-wife of Sota, and according to Rav Asi, for sure is not about excluded a co-wife of Ailonit. Is vira lehu dahadade. If both Rav and Rav Asi each hold each other ruling, you have to say chada lemeute tzarat mema'enen. One wants to exclude the co-wife of a minor who refused the yavam. As we explained in the first daf, there is a concept that she can refuse. For example, in the age that she in the age that she can refuse to marry, we have to ask her. Up to the age of 12 and 1 day is one category. Then from that point she's bogeret, and there's a certain period of time that even she's below than 12 and 1 day. If she lost her father, there are protection we involve with her rights. וחדה למיעוטה צרת מחזיר גרושתו, and one who come to exclude the co-wife of a remarried divorcee. Let's face it, you have a situation that man has two wives. One whom is an orphan minor, and he died without children. So after he passed away, you have a situation that his wife, who was an orphan minor, use their ability, their right of mi'un toward the yavam. So that's you see, this idea applies to both. Ve'ilo svira lehud la'adadei, if they don't hold each of them the rule of the others. Chada lema'utei chavrei, one come to exclude the other fellow ruling. V'chada leme'utei, and one come to teach us, or tzarat mema'enet, to exclude either the co-wife of a woman who refused to yavam, or tzarat, or the co-wife machazir grushato, of one who remarried the divorcee. So the Gemara asks, Lerav Asel lit ninhu. So these both Sotah and Ailonit exempt their co-wives. So the Mishnah should mention those cases, those women. Why it's not included in the list in the Mishnah that exempt the co-wives? Lefi she'ena betzara tzara, because they are not subject of the rule of a co-wife, co-wives. Because all those that we have in the Mishnah, the forbidden woman is an erva, the issue of nakedness, to only one of the brothers, the surviving brother, but it's permitted to the other. So menane the Tanu Rabbanan. Now we zoom in the text in Leviticus 18. Isha el achota lo tikach litzror legalot ervata alea bechaya. The text said, you shall not take a woman in addition to her sister to make them rival wives. That's called tzarot. To uncover her nakedness upon her name, which means to leave the new wife while her sister, which is the original wife, is alive. Alea ma Talmud lomar. What is the reason that it's prohibited? Lefi shene'emar, because they said in Deuteronomy 25, Yevama yavo alea, which is the idea of ייבום, the woman husband dies childless, her yavam shall have relation with her. So what we learn from that? Shomea ani, I understand from that, afilu be'achat, even in one, mikol arayot amurot batorah, כתוב מדבר, even one case that the Yavama, all those lists of arayot, of the prohibited mentioned in the Torah. Ne'emar kan alea. We learn it from the verbal analogy. In one place they use the word aleha. Okay? That's called zeira shava. And v'ne'emar le'alan aleha. Ma le'alan bimkom mitzvah. The same way as in ייבום, which means when the husband died childless, so you have the mitzvah of ייבום, his wife, of kan, if here, bimkom mitzvah. V'amar Rachmana lo tikach, woman and sister should not take, which means a person are prohibited to marry the sister of his wife, even if she come before him for ייבום. Ve'en li ela hi, you understand that she herself, meaning the sister of his wife, that is prohibited from ייבום. Tzarata minayin. How do you know that the co-wife is prohibited to have this act of ייבום? Talmud lomar litzror. Litzror looks superfluous because it's obvious that someone who married the wife of the sister of his wife, when his wife is alive, he created a rivalry. Thank you, between one to another. So therefore, we have to learn that Torah come and expanded on that prohibition. Also for the sister of his wife, in addition to tzarata. You shall see more the Chafetz Chaim explanation on that text in the Torah. ואין לי אלא tzarata, tzarata mina. And how do you know that the co-wife of the co-wife is prohibited to act as a ייבום? Talmud lomar litzror velo latzor. So it means that the Torah come and teach us the prohibition of adding more tzarot, more co-wives. ואין לי אלא אחות אישה. We understand that only is a sister of his wife. שאר עריות מניין. How do you know the rest of the prohibition of עריות, of nakedness? אמרת, מה אחות אישה מיוחדת שהיא ערווה וחייבים על זמנה כרת ושגתה חרטת ואסורה לייבם? That's all involved in the violation that we need to have more time. I see we're running out of time. אף כל, so I'm just going fast now. אף כל שהיא ערווה וחייבים על זמנה כרת ושגתה חרטת אסורה לייבם. ואין לי אלא צרותיהם מניין. That applies specifically for עריות. How do you know the co-wife? אמרת, מה אחות אישה מיוחדת שהיא ערווה וחייבים על זונה כרת ועל שגתה חרטת ואסורה לייבם, וצרתה אסורה, אף כל שהיא ערווה וחייבים על זונה כרת ועל שגתה חרטת ואסורה לייבם, צרתה אסורה. So, meaning also צרותיהם, the co-wife of the co-wife of all this list of עריות are prohibited to act in ייבום. So in conclusion, כאן אמרו חכמים 15 נשים. Now we derive the Mishnah that tells us that the 15 type of situation with the women פותרות exempt צרותיהם וצרות צרותיהם מן החליצה ומן הייבום עד סוף כל העולם. Now we put together the reason that we have this structure of this Mishnah, because you have 15 type of situation of women that are forbidden to a person from this Isur Karet, this biblical law of that soul should be cut off, that it can happen that they marry to his brother and they can act in a Levite marriage, and that's the 15 that we mentioned in the Mishnah. In addition, you have another 6 situation that we're going to learn in the Mishnah on page 13, that you have the Karet prohibition, but you don't have their issue of Nefilah ייבום, because they are close to him from his father, so therefore they are prohibited for his brother from his father in prohibition of erva, the same ways that they are prohibited for him. So they cannot marry to his brother. More on that you see in Gemara in Kiddushin, page 66, and therefore, consequently, they cannot have a ייבום with him. So the Braita continues, יכול שנים הרבה אף 6 עריות חמורות מאלו, which means that you have to add the other 6 on the list of the 15, which is those list of arayot that prohibited also for his brother from his father, and they married to someone else, שיהיו צרותיהם אסורות, that those co-wife prohibited. אמרת, he said no, because the source of that is the אחות אישה, the sister of his wife. So you cannot, מה אחות אשתו מיוחדת שהרבה וחברים הזונה קרב ושגדה אחת, ואפשר לנסה לאחים בסורה ליבם, she can marry the others and not prohibited for Levite marriage for the brother, וצרתה אסורה and the co-wife is prohibited, אף כל שהרבה וחברים הזונה קרב ושגדה אחת, ואפשר לנסה לאחים בסורה ליבם, צרתה אסורה. יצאו 6 עריות החמורות מאלו. You have to exclude the 6 category of עריות that much stringent than that one. הואיל ואי אפשר להינשא לאחים, because the whole source is אחות אישה and they cannot marry to those brothers, צרותיהם, the co-wives, מותרות, שאין צרה אלא מאח. The whole concept of co-wife applies also only from a brother that died without having children, but nothing else. So the Gemara concluded and they said, Azhara Shamanu. From that pasuk we learn, teach us about the sister of his wife. We derive that the Torah warns us not to act in Levite way for the nakedness, erva, and tzarata, and the co-wife. However, onesh, someone who violated that, menayin, how do you know that we implicated also punishment to someone who violated that Torah law? Amar Kra, because at the end of that chapter in Leviticus 18, sentence 29, the Torah said, Ki kol asher ya'aseh mikol ha'toevot ha'ele, anyone who violated all these abomination, all this list of abomination, the Torah said, v'nichretu ha'nefashot ha'osot mikerev ha'ma'at, all those souls shall be cut off, which means that Torah put together, it's a general term, all the list of the abomination, which we read in Yom Kippur afternoon, that anyone who does that, he is in a karet meaning by heavenly court, that soul shall be cut off, and therefore, erva and tzara, that fall in that category of ייבום, that we derive the prohibition from this line, it's included in that punishment of karet. The pasuk, the sentence teaches. So the Braita teaches that the idea how the Torah wrap it very sophisticatedly at the very end, put this line, it's applied to all the previous lists. So even those who imply indirectly in the pasuk of Achot Isha, the sister of the wife, which is Erva and Tzarata, that follow the ייבום. So it means from now that all laws of Erva and co-wives, it's the same law as the wife of his brother, that it's all follow in the category of karet.